Hey!
Greetings friend and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be going over everything that you need to know for the new Deep of Night Poison Ironeye build. So if you want to do something like this, then you came to the right place. The two main things that you need are your bow to start with poison. In this case I have the Sentient Pest Relic just because I don't really have any other ones that fit Ironeye well enough and have that effect. And the other being the additional character skill use, just because you get so much more mileage out of the new Deep of Night Relic by being able to dash all the time. When I was initially testing it out, I have the effect that adds the poison to holding down your ultimate charge. I just found that that wasn't necessary because you're able to apply it well enough just with your base bow with the poison on it. In its place, I have an Evergel effect to ramp up attack. These are my Deep of Night relics, and you need that first one to make this new build work. Essentially, you proc poison on an enemy first before applying the mark, and then dash through it twice to inflict very heavy damage to it. This isn't a fully ideal setup quite yet, just because I haven't gotten lucky with ones that add to this build enough, but anything that increases attack power against poison afflicted enemies will work very well for this. And I also have the reduced dexterity for increased arcane, which actually increases the arcane to base executor for the trade-off of a little bit less damage from bows themselves. That's a little bit more personal preference. I don't feel like it's completely necessary, but it does open the door for being able to use bleed or frost or rot very effectively as well. So I've typically been proccing the poison, doing the 2 dashes, and then switching to whatever weapon has the status effect that I've been hunting for. I've actually been on the lookout lately for the dormant power to discover katanas or claws, whichever comes first, just because both have very good bleed buildup. It's super quick to proc, and it just absolutely shreds enemies on top of the poison dash. So the dormant power, or just loot drops in general from bosses or from chests, there's certain chances to get a class-specific item. So the base ones that roll on the characters, like bows for Ironeye, for instance, but there's not a guarantee for that every time, and it varies based on which location you're at and what kind of boss you're fighting and things like that. But whenever you would get a class-specific one, then it would replace it with that. So katanas or claws are just probably the best that would pair well with Ironeye's stats. If you don't have the dormant power override in your build, then in general you want to get your starting bow to blue as soon as possible, purple a little bit later on, ideally hitting one of the mines to get the purple smithing stone, but because you can't really count on getting the serpent bow. I mean, that's great, you don't need to get the purple smithing stone if that's the case, but not something to rely on. Aside from that, you really just want any weapons that work well or fit your playstyle the best, and balancing passives that are beneficial, like the increased ranged weapon attack or projectile damage fall-off reduction. Those will be the best ones for Ironeye, and then just trying to avoid things like the continuous HP loss or just the most detrimental ones, status build up below max HP. Those ones are kind of the rougher ones to roll with. The Nightlords all have their own unique resistances to poison behind the scenes. Essentially how this works is the first time that you proc poison, it's based off of their starting value, and then every time after that it'll become more and more difficult to proc poison on them, and the same goes for other status effects as well. Fulgor, Libra, and Adel all have a base value of 154 for poison resistance, with Adel being the only one that has a straight up weakness to it as highlighted in the main screen. Caligo and Fortis, or the Scorpion in the Sentient Pest fight, both have 252 for their base value. Animus has 542, but that's a little bit less relevant because you're not going to be able to very consistently do the dashes when that's poisoned. Gladius is the toughest to proc poison on with a value of 542, and Augur and Healster are both immune to poison in general, so do not just sit there and spam poison arrows on them hoping that proc it will not work. Any bow with an effect that triggers on precision aiming will be fantastic, and you can absolutely center a build around. Things like blood flies or lightning. Just, you have to two-hand the bow and then aim and fire, and it will do that on every single arrow that connects. Precision aiming is also a good way to trigger any wall walking passives that you've accrued throughout the expedition, things like Wraiths or the Star Rain. Another thing to not discount is the charge attack effects you can get on melee weapons. They'll do things like Black Flame or Lightning, for instance, but they do incredible stance damage and just damage in general, especially if you can find them on a quicker weapon like a dagger or katana or claws, for instance. They just absolutely shred. Like, I had gotten a Glintstone Chris dagger that had lightning and charge attack, and it made very short work of the Crucible Knights in the castle. Let me know down in the comments if you found anything else that works really well with this build. I've just been having so much fun with it. It's just great to have a way to be incentivized to maintain mark and do insane damage while doing so, and just supporting your team normally playing Ironeye. It really just feels like this kept Ironeye on the map and made him almost a must-pick for this new Deep in Night mode. If you'd like to see more of this kind of content, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated. And I'll let the rest of this expedition play out, and see you at the Nightlord. And that is a good showcase for what the Bloodflies on precision aiming can do. Absolutely chunks the health bar when just hitting normally and shreds it whenever bleed procs. Unfortunately, I was not able to get a lightning bow or a lightning weapon for this last fight against Augur, and with it being immune to poison, the best way to be dealing damage will be using the black bow and using the Bloodflies on precision aiming whenever possible. It won't be able to bleed either, unfortunately, but the Bloodflies themselves will do a little bit extra damage. With this being the Deep of Night mode, the nukes that it drops have more health than before. That's scaled up as well, unfortunately, as I found out, but it's still a great fight, and loving this mode and this new Ironeye build, just being able to not have to pick the Nightlord or the Shifting Earth or anything like that, and completely adapt to the new and changing situations. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully it wasn't too obvious that I don't have very many reps in the base Augur fight. Do not forget,
You're beautiful.
thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
PlayStation